Hi, I want to go through the main points involved with Chapter 4, Evaluating Interface Designs. And I have to tell you, this was a chapter that I knew quite a bit about because with every system, whether it be a application IT system, whether it be a website, whether it just be a mobile app, being able to evaluate whether the design met the requirements and whether the users found it to be helpful is critical. So here we have our guy here we have a guy and he's watching somebody who's using the system and he's the designer most likely, and he says, no, that's not how you're supposed to use it. That's a common thing that happens. So we want to look at usability testing. How do we test if the system is being used the way it is? And there's several ways that we can do this. When we do this, first of all, the key things that we're looking for is to see, is it useful what we've done? Can the user find what they need to do? Is it accessible, meaning it meets the universal design standards? Is it usable? Does it do the functions we want? And do the users find it to be something that they enjoy using? So when you're all developers, whether it be for as simple as a website or as complicated as an IT system, they get very excited about their idea, and their idea in their mind is not always so clear to the people around them. So one of the key things we have to do when we evaluate whether a system's interfaces are effective is we have to put this evaluation plan. How do we evaluate it? And there's a couple of things. First of all, you have to be looking at user experience, not just at the end. It's too late to make all the changes, but you have to have stages in the design process where you are asking users, what do you think? Is this what you want? Is this going to meet the needs that you have? And you're able to do that through different ways. First, you provide them maybe with paper copy, then you create actually a prototype on the computer, and then you actually have some data with the test system, and then actually the live system. So these are some of the things you have to do. Projects, novelty of a new project always gets people excited unless they hate the idea of change. So once it goes into something of a reality, it goes from novelty to actually working. People change their expectation in the sense that they become more anxious about learning this new thing. So we have to look at how does the novelty of the project change it, the number of expected users, how critical is it for doing the job. So for example, if it's a life critical medical system, you have to be right on target versus a museum exhibit. Nobody's going to get hurt. I worked in this area, the life critical medical system, of which I had a whole bunch of different users. I had my nursing users, I had my doctor users, I had my registration users. They all had different issues. They all had different levels of computer savvy. Different age groups had different levels of savvy as well. So looking at the criticality of the interface, the cost, what's associated, is this a very high cost item or is this a low cost item? An experience of the design and the evaluation team. Excuse me. Okay, so once you have identified what you have to do, there's several different ways. You can bring in experts. An expert is somebody who knows a lot about it. So if you're in the gaming industry, for example, you might want to bring in experts because they know how to play games. They know that the game should have goal completion. They know that there should be transitions. They know that excellent gamers want to skip over steps. They don't need to go through each step. So having experts review your system is really a very positive way to look at it. In the medical community, it would be a great way for having a doctor look at my system and a nurse look at them, and have them all be part of the design team actually is a key component. But with experts, you have other considerations. You have the realization that the time required for actually producing your product is going to be elongated because you have to get all these different people in. And you have to identify like what each of them should be looking for. You can't just say, what do you think of something? You have to put together guidelines for what is it they're reviewing. You have to have multiple people. You can't just pick one or two. And the method that you pick them is also very important. You have to ask them, is it doing what they want them to do? Cognitive walkthrough. Is it doing the functions? Does it make sense how we're walking through it? And then the metaphor of human thinking, meaning the think out loud protocol. Tell me what you're thinking while you're doing this task. That is a very common way to be able to understand what the user is really thinking. Like, I'm going to have to click on the file button or I'm going to have to click on the view button because this text is too small and I can't see it, would be an example of the user giving you a think out loud process while they're using your system, something you wouldn't capture otherwise. And then formal usability inspection criteria. For example, if you work for a company that is publicly traded on the stock market and this is a mission critical system, let's say that this is a financial system, it has to meet certain goals and it has to meet certain criteria of to be actually to be considered to be a valid system, or the auditors will come in and they will fail your system. So expert reviews is one. This is a wonderful website. It's called usability.gov. We looked at it before. I'm going to just quickly show it to you because I have it up someplace in my browser. And I want you to go to this website because this website is superior in terms of identifying all of the things that we want to do when we're doing usability testing. This particular one is what and why of usability under usability.gov. And what I like about this particular website is it talks about, the design process, optimizing the user experience. But what I liked was it got into some very specific things about headings, how to use clear labels, provide descriptive page titles. All of these things could be a metric that you can use when you're evaluating a website. Provide users a good way to reduce options. These things are all very helpful. The text, use of mixed and prose. This particular black on high contrast. This is a recommendation. Black text on a plain background. Reliable, faster reading performance than on a medium textured background. So it gives you information that you should use. If what you have is a high text type of application, well, then you're going to want to have something where it's black text on a plain background. When compared to reading light text on a dark background, people read black text on a white background up to 32% faster. Important information. So this is a fantastic website that we will go into more detail as we move further in the class, especially as we're looking at our project, which I'll talk about much later. Okay, there are some places where you can actually have testing, usability testing and laboratories. When I worked with Siemens, we had actually a test environment. We created pseudo type of cases that we would then have nurses run through so that they would be able to simulate their work. This is an example, I think, of testing systems where actually they might record the system, they sit with the user as they're going through it. We didn't do this as formally as we could have at Siemens, but as I look at this now, I think that the usability testing could have been improved immensely. Videotaping people is a good way to be able to see how they actually did the process themselves. So for example, our cartoon was sort of doing that. He was watching somebody who was using the system. Videotaping is important because you want your system to be intuitive to your user. Intuitive meaning that the user is able to come to the next step on their own. The system is that obvious. And videotaping allows you to be able to watch the user as they're doing their task, to be able to see if they're able to figure out where they should go. I have found that to be a very effective way for some other projects that I've been on. The Think Aloud protocol, which I mentioned before, is important for key users. So for example, I would identify an expert user in each category, and I would ask that expert user as they're going through it to do this Think Aloud protocol. Tell me what you're thinking as you're doing the task. The problem with a Think Aloud protocol is that because there's more cognitive load for them to be able to express all of the things that they're thinking about as they tell you each task, the time, you can't really measure the time to task as accurately as you would if you didn't ask them to do that. So there's many forms of usability testing that have been tried. You can look at these, they're in the book, but the can you break this test, that's a very popular one that almost every system, especially a mission critical system, has to have, is identifying, trying every single link to see, is there a problem, can you break it? You should do this with everything that you have, because believe me, if you don't, somebody else will break it, and then they'll end up going to a site that they don't want to, or they'll be stuck for some reason. Field testing and portable labs. This would be if you have a large group of users and they're scattered all over the place, and you need to test to see if somebody in California might do this particular task differently than somebody in Canada. All right. So, and we did talk about the universal usability. All right, we can just play from current slide. Okay. Okay, so these were some other examples of usability testing that are more automated. This is an example of eye tracking, where you're actually tracking the person's eyes as they're moving through the screen. Where do they start? Where do they go? So I had a very interesting experience this semester. Somebody came to see me, and they were confused about dates, and they were confused about how to start this online class. And I said, well, geez, didn't you go to the home page? Because clearly the home page is very clear, and there's a part that says click here, and it takes you to the page that I explained how the class works. And he said, no, I didn't go to that. What I did is I went to my calendar, and my calendar told me what I needed to do, and that's all I did. So he was very clear to me, and he said, you know, if you really want people to go to this link, you need to almost make it something that would show up on the assignment page so that it would show up in my calendar. In addition, you need to have it big and bold, not try to make it so aesthetically pleasing. I had it looking like the journey starts here. It was a cute little picture. He said, no, just say click here with bold, and that's how people will know. Make it very clear. So I did that, and you'll see that in this class. And that's probably something I could have done. I could have tried tried this out with a student who'd never taken an online course, my course, and says, do you know what you would do? And that might have improved the user experience for each of you as you struggled in the beginning as to how an online course works and how I teach an online course. Survey instruments. This is a topic that you will become intimately familiar with this week, because one of the best ways to find out how people perceive your system in terms of usability, in terms of functionality, in terms of appearance, is to ask them, right? So a lot of times you don't have time to be asking all your users. You don't have time to get all your users together because they don't have the time to do it. But what you can do is you can create a survey and you can send it out. Now, a problem with the survey, as you know, is not everybody responds to the survey. I don't respond to all surveys. And sometimes you have to give them an incentive to respond. But if it's something related to their job, the chances of them responding are pretty high. So creating a survey. This week we are creating a survey. We're using a tool called SurveyMonkey, and I have another video on that that you will need to look at to be successful in the discussion board this week. And this is a very big project because you are going to get 10 points from the discussion board and then another 5 for your finalized survey. But what this survey will do is you will be creating a survey, not actually surveying anybody, creating a survey to ask students about their perceptions of our LMS Canvas. So my goal is pretty clear. What is the student experience using Canvas? You know, what are the items? So I talk in the assignment, I go through the items. I say, look at the announcements, look at the communication, look at the assignments, look at the quizzes, looking at the functions within the LMS. And survey goals can be tied to objects, action, interface models. For example, our survey can say, how easy is it to navigate? How easy is it to work on the discussion board? You know, these are the types of things that you want to find out. And you want to also get qualitative information. So there's 2 types of information you can get from a survey. One is quantitative, where you just pick yes, no, or 5, 4, 3, you know, in terms of rating scales on a scale of 1 to 5, How satisfied are you with it? And you put a 3, and that 3 means nothing because it's neutral. But you also want to get qualitative information. Qualitative information is words that people would type. They're people's thoughts that they actually generate. They are the qualitative information explains the quantitative information. The words explain why they gave something a rating of neutral. I only rated the navigation a 3 because I felt it was difficult to go between the inbox and then go back to my course. That type of information is critical, and that explains the actual rating. So there's quantitative information and qualitative. SurveyMonkey will allow you to do both. When you combine both types of information, that is called a mixed method survey. Sounds easy enough. So usability testing is really what we're talking about in the beginning of this, and that's talking about the satisfaction. Are people able to easily learn and go from one function to another? Is it desirable? Do they find it, doing a job might not be desirable, but is it not objectionable? How about that? And is it reliable or credible? Does it do the same thing every time? User acceptance testing is different. So when I think of user acceptance testing, I think that when you have identified what an LMS should do, an LMS should do the following things. It should be able to do testing. It should be able to send emails to students. It should be able to house information. It should be able to allow students to search information. There are certain criteria that the system should do. Those items are usually defined in a contractual arrangement in the very beginning when a system is being created. That these are the minimum requirements that this system must do before the user will say that this system is accepted. And if it doesn't meet those minimum things, the roadmap validation, the support doesn't, when you test it, it doesn't actually work, then the user says, I don't accept this system. I will not take it. I will not use it. I'm not ready for it to go. I'm not paying you for it. Okay? So you can see there is this intersection between usability testing and user acceptance testing. And, things that affect user acceptance are going to be errors, efficiency, takes too long to do a task, and learnability. How long does it take to learn the system? So that is a difference between the two. You need to know and understand that. So rather than in an acceptance testing, I like this particular verbiage that came from the publisher. Rather than vague and misleading criteria of user-friendly, tell us what is user-friendly. Time to learn the specific functions, speed of a task, rate of errors, the human retention over time, subjective user satisfaction. User-friendly is not very user-friendly. Ha ha ha. It's not very useful. But these items all are components that make something user-friendly. So let's drill down to the specific items here. And these are the things that you're going to want to be looking at when you're creating your own survey. So the last thing I want to talk about is this concept of psychologically oriented experiments. Really what it's talking about is the methodology that you would use. When we're creating any kind of experiment or we're doing any kind of research, we have to have a methodology, the scientific method. And how is the scientific method applied to human-computer interaction? That's really what we're asking here. So a scientific problem has a practical problem, and it considers a theoretical framework. It means that there's some method that we're going to go about looking at this problem. There's a testable hypothesis, and the testable hypothesis might be that help desk calls go down because graphic user interfaces are easier for users to use. So if you made everything a graphical user interface, you would not have so many help desks because people would know what to do. Dependent and independent variables. So dependent variable is something that if one criteria changes, that would be different. So an example, an independent, first it says identify a number of independent variables. So maybe in my example, the independent variable is help desk calls. And the dependent variable is the interface presentation. So the help desk calls go down when the interface presentation is more in a graphic mode. Okay. Selecting your subjects. Just sending the survey to a bunch of your friends is not a sound methodological approach. That would be a convenience sample. So selecting the people that you're going to send your survey to requires some thought and some strategic methodology. We're not dealing with that now, but we will eventually get into some of these components because that's how we're going to do our usability testing in the end. Looking for biases, like for example, I might be more biased towards Canvas, saying it's very easy because I'm an native English speaker. B, I was on the committee to pick Canvas, and C, I am highly technical, so technology doesn't trouble me. And resolve any kind of practical problems, refine the theory. Look at the literature should really be another one of these things. So these are the key things that I wanted to talk about today. I really look forward to the discussion board, and I think we're going to have a great class. Thanks. Bye-bye.